person or virtual, it's nice to tell stories while rolling some dice. But if you want to add flavor to combat you can savor, then I have martial arts advice. Hello everyone, Lauren back with you, and today a slight divergence from the normal topics. If you've tuned into this channel before, you know I talk about arms and armor, a lot of sword stuff, how to fight, European martial arts, all sorts of fun things. And, you know, we've passed 600 subscribers, everything's going well, but I wanted to divert and hopefully do a couple of videos on how you can take the reality of a real sword fight and use it to flavor your tabletop role-playing games. Because instead of just taking your die and rolling and say, do I hit? Oh, it's a 19. Yeah, I hit and I do damage. Well, that's fine, but you could make it a little more exciting. What kind of hit? How did you swing? Or did you thrust? How did you use that sword? And is it just a single move? Well, a sword fight is not just I attack, I hit, or I miss. A sword fight is going to be 3 to 4 movements within just a few seconds in order to build a combination of cuts and thrusts, perhaps, that eventually land and do the damage to the target. So that's what I wanted to explore today. Just to broaden out my channel a little bit and to broaden out your descriptions in your games. Now, I'm not talking about creating a complex system to resolve things. I'm not saying that I need to roll a whole bunch of d6s. You know, I need to roll 17 dice in order to figure out all of the steps of the combination that I want to roll. Now, we still want our games to be fun. We still want them to progress at a good speed. We do not want, you know, 1 minute of combat in a game to take 2 hours to figure out. That would be a bit much. We still want it to go fast. So what I'm talking about is when you roll that die, when you come up with result, is this going to be successful or failure, you can then use a few terms to describe it. So we'll talk about those terms. There was a die that went straight. Make sure I don't step on it. So what does that mean? So as the camera focuses and we kick the chair out of the way, there we go. Yes, on this channel, we just do one take, and whatever happens during the take, happens. So, I'm going to use a longsword, two-handed, because that's how longswords should be used, of course. And what do I really mean? Now, what am I talking about when I want to add some flavor to my descriptions of a role-playing game? So, an attack is not just, oh, did it hit or miss? Oh, I did damage. Somehow I got past the armor and the opposing weapon. But we know that when people are fighting, are they going to block? Are they going to react? There's an attack and defense to every movement. Whatever the system uses to help determine that, whether it's d20 or 2d6 or a percentile die, however it is, you can just use the system, but you can frame it in a great narrative way, particularly if it's a critical hit or it's the final blow to the enemy. So let's, for example, say an owlbear. Why? Because I think that's really cool. If you don't know, if you're not into the tabletop role-playing game side of things, an owlbear, of course, is a cross between a bear and an owl made by a wizard. Okay, so you're fighting the owlbear. Instead of just saying, I swing, do I hit? I roll my die, oh, I hit, and I do 6 damage. But you could say, oh, I attack. I land a successful overhead strike to the shoulder, and I draw the blade out for 8 points of damage. Ooh, sounds a lot better, right? But even better still, you're fighting something. You could say, I parry the incoming claw attack of the owlbear, flip the sword over, and drive the point through its eye and into its brain, ending its life and saving my companions. A little dramatic, but that sounds a lot better than, oh, I hit it for a critical hit and rolled 12 points of damage. And, oh yeah, you killed it. It's dead. Experience time. Oh, boring. You can flavor things. So, what are we talking about? So, you can attack, of course, an overhead cut, an underhand cut, over, under, a thrust. And keep in mind, a lot of weapons both cut and thrust. Particularly 14th century onward. Swords can do various different things. Maybe you struck something with a pommel. Maybe that's a move that you can do. Instead, when you're rolling a critical hit in your game, maybe you didn't just cut and do damage. Maybe you knocked an opponent's sword aside and smashed their skull with the pommel. And all that weight knocked them out. Adding flavor, right? So what are we talking about? Parries, blocks, beats. You knock the opposing sword aside, and that's when you opened up to do a false edge cut, or a reverse, a reversal, for example. Little swishing cuts. You can really focus on that. So this owlbear that we're going to fight in our fictional scenario, we're not just, we're not doing that until it dies, and it's doing the same to us. We're really thinking that combat is moving around in your small space, blocking, parry. So instead of the owlbear misses you, you parry the owlbear's attack. I use the flat of my blade to knock its claws aside. Now it's my turn in the initiative order, and I go and I roll, and do I hit? Maybe I can say, well, if I moved it aside, so I'm going to chop into its upper arm, and now it is injured and bleeding profusely. I like the word profusely. So we can talk about those things. Fighting other weapons, we can beat the weapon to the side, we can parry an incoming attack and counter. We can frame all of this together so that when we're building the narrative with our friends, when we're telling these shared stories, we're really hyping up the action. It's more than just, I hit, I do damage, what happens next? Talk about it. Really bring it up. Maybe, oh, I only did 2 points of damage on that roll. What a bad roll, even though it was a normal hit. Maybe, oh, my cut was off and I hit, and I smacked with the flat of the blade into the side of the head. You can create these little bits of fiction, this little narrative explanation of what that means. So you can translate the dice into a good story. And that's really what it's about. Translating your dice into something exciting around the table to share with your friends. So whether you're the game master or a player, whether it's a solo game, a cooperative game, whatever, you can build these little narratives. So, you know, the evil knight is coming at me. I managed to block the sword. I go for a feint from my weak side, disengage the sword underneath, and step forward with a thrust to the throat. Something like that, right? Of course, this is armored. We talk about armored fighting instead of unarmored fighting. So there's blodsfechten and there's harnessfechten. I have other videos on that, but the point being, when you fight someone in armor, you hold the sword like this. You shorten up your grip. So we call it the shortened sword, or modern day half swording. And now I'm jabbing that point under the arm and tearing into the arteries, or I'm aiming for the slit on the visor of my opponent's helmet, and I'm digging that point deep into their face, rather than just, I rolled a hit. Oh, I beat the armor class, so I do damage. Not as exciting. So, that was the point of today's video, is just to tell you how you can take real martial arts, and there are a lot of different martial arts, not just European stuff, African, Indian, Chinese, Korean, Japanese, and much, much more. There are a lot of different forms of martial arts out there. Explore. Find channels on YouTube, wikitenhour.com. You can go and look at actual sources and see how they talk about fighting, because this stuff isn't just what we made up. This stuff is written down, particularly in European martial arts. We have 700-year lineage of manuals that tell us how to fight. They describe things. So we know that this is a plow guard, and we could say, from my plow guard, I beat with a krumpau and do a false edge cut to the opposing neck. We could say that. Now, you don't want to get too carried away, because you still want to keep up the good pace of your game. But you can flavor it, you can season it, you can add dimension to how you run your game and your descriptions by simply taking some martial arts terms and throwing them in. No one says you have to be a martial artist, but if you can really create that hype, you create that atmosphere, and you create that connection between you and the other people playing the game, and you really build a great shared experience through storytelling, just by adding something like, to say, I disengage and then thrust, or I I parry and counterattack. Simple little things like that. You can get very flowy and dramatic, or you can keep it simple. Just a few little terms. But just some advice on how you can take the real world of sword fighting and real martial arts and history and add it to your games, not so that you have a complex system, but so that you have a better story experience that really hypes everyone up and creates a satisfying conclusion to how your fights go. Anyway, thanks friends. Do appreciate you for sticking around for this very different video. I'll probably do a few more role-playing game videos coming up. Do remember, like, subscribe, and most importantly, comment, because your comments help shape the content of the channel, and I always appreciate them. So friends, do take care, stay safe, and keep on swinging.